I turned these two items into this, and this tea set into this, and this little treasure, I turned it into this using this mold, and I'm going to show you how in today's video. All of the projects in today's video are why I love to DIY home decor, and by the end of the video I hope you'll agree. I used this thrifted candlestick and this jar that I pulled from my recycle bin for project number 1. I used sandpaper to rough up the areas where I'm going to apply the glue to glue these two things together. I used the Cherry Blossom mold by Redesign with Prima, and I used Crayola air dry clay. Now I am really trying to use the supplies that I have on hand, and this was the only clay I had on hand, and I did not have high hopes for this project. I thought for sure I would be running to the store to get more clay, but this clay was being stored in my garage, and I live in Las Vegas. And when I pulled this clay out, it was so soft and easy to work with. And I was so happy that I forgot to use cornstarch in the mold before I put in the clay. So I just kept going. I filled the whole mold up with clay, and then I popped it in the freezer and I left it overnight. Now it's the next morning and the glue has dried on my candlestick, and I want to paint the candlestick, but first I need to spray it with a matte clear sealer so that the paint has something to adhere to. And here is my candlestick in the background, and you can see that haziness on the glass. That is from the sealer. And you can also see that the clay is coming right out of the mold. I used Weld Bond glue to glue the clay to the candlestick. And I didn't realize that my camera wasn't on, which is so frustrating. And then to find out that my head was in the way when I did get my camera on. But anyway, I have 2 more projects. So between those 2, you'll see exactly how to glue them on. Now, I was using Weld Bond. You could also use Tite Bond. And here's what it looks like after I got all my flowers glued on. Now, my favorite white paint is Antique Villa by Wise Owl Paint. But I didn't get the lid put on. You can see how awful the top looks with everything dried out. You can see all the chunks and how thick the paint is. But this is what I'm going to do to fix it. I'm going to add some water. And then I took my Thrifted immersion blender that I also use for milk paint, and I tried to get this paint so I could use it again. Because you know, paint's expensive and this is good paint. So I wanted to be able to use it. Now, it does take me like 5 minutes to figure out how to turn this thing on. Is she ever gonna get it? There, I got it. You actually push down, not in. And I'm gonna just get all those chunky parts mixed up. Sometimes the paint's too far gone and you cannot fix it, but fortunately I could still use this paint. After 2 coats of paint, there were still some gaps between the mold and the candlestick, so I decided to add some salt wash to the paint for the 3rd coat. And I pounced on the paint and just used a little extra in the gaps. There were a few bigger gaps, so I used a little paintbrush. The salt wash added a little too much texture for my liking, so I took some 220 sandpaper and I just went over the candlestick just to make it a little bit smoother. I didn't need that much texture. I was using Wiseowl 1 Hour enamel paint, and it has a built-in sealer. So when you have a sealer, you don't necessarily need to use a clear wax first, but I like to use it first because I just want better control over the dark wax. And I'm using that inexpensive brush again to get the wax down in all those little nooks and crannies, because it's that dark wax that brings out all the detail in the molds. I get all the extra wax buffed off, and just so you remember, this is what it was before. And here's the after. I think this thing turned out so pretty. But you'll have to let me know what you think. And would you ever know that the top of this candlestick was a jar out of my recycle bin? You'll have to let me know in the comments. And this candlestick was the inspiration for my next 2 projects. For my next project, I took this silver-plated tea set that I purchased sometime last year, and right before Christmas, I painted it in Dixie Belle Slick Stick, which is a primer for slick surfaces. And wear gloves because it will ruin a manicure. Now, after I got this whole thing painted, I just had no inspiration. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But one of my sister-in-laws came over and said, "Why don't you make it like that candlestick?" This time I used Titebond instead of Weld Bond, probably because I couldn't find my Weld Bond, but they both work great. I thought I might need painter's tape to hold the clay in place while it was drying, but this glue was thick enough that I had no problems with anything sliding. And this is what it looked like after all the molds were glued on. And those silk flowers there, those were my inspiration for making a dark and moody fall inspired piece. But you know what? I didn't have purple or burgundy, so I decided to mix some colors together and make a burgundy. And here's how it looked after 2 coats of paint. And my custom paint color, yeah, we'll call it that, was mostly Fusion Mineral Paint, which has a built-in top coat, so I could go right in with the black wax without having to use a clear wax first. And I apologize, I don't know what my camera was focused on at this point. And here's what it looks like after the dark wax. But we're still not done. I knew somewhere I had a silver platter, and then I remembered I had bought this table at an estate sale, and this was my attempt to just make it cute while it was super hot outside. But there was the platter that I was looking for. And like I said, I never take the price tag off anything. Now this time I didn't use Slick Stick because it takes 24 hours to dry. So I went right in with Fusion Mineral Paint in the color black. If you've ever used Fusion Mineral Paint, it doesn't come off of anything. It doesn't come off your hands. You can't wash it off. So I thought I might be safe just going right in with this paint. I'm even wearing an apron. But anyway, so I painted this whole thing in the black because I didn't want this whole thing to be matchy-matchy. And then I did the scratch test, which it looked like it was going to stick. This is also a paint where you should really wear gloves because it will ruin your manicure. And then I gave it a sanding before the next coat of paint. And after 2 coats, it was looking pretty good with no problems. I flipped it over and did the back the same way, and all the paint peeled off. Once I got all the paint off, I took it outside and I gave it a coat of Rust-Oleum 2-time matte clear finish. It's a sealer, and I was hoping that the paint would stick to it, and it did. Now I wanted the tray and the tea set to look like they went together, but I didn't want a matchy-matchy, so I took some of the paint and mixed it with the clear wax to make like a burgundy wax to go over all the detail on the tray. Next, I wanted to bring out some more detail on those flowers, so I did 3 sample sticks. I did 2 different colors of gold and some white wax, and I ended up choosing the gold because it had kind of a copper look to it. It's called Cosmic Ray Gold by Redesign with Prima, and I just put some on the end of my finger and just went right over the tops of the molds, which you can't see because my head's in the way. I didn't realize my head was in the way. I usually have a monitor that I work off so I know what I'm filming, but I don't know why. I don't know what I was looking at. Sometimes I get so involved that I forget to look. So I will fast forward through all of this. I did the same thing to the tray. And here's how they turned out. I think they turned out so pretty, and I just love the subtleness of that coppery color. Now I am building my Dark and Moody autumn vignette, so you'll get to see the final shot after the next DIY or project. So let's get into it. I think it might be my favorite. The last project, and what might be my favorite because of the transformation, is I got this pumpkin from Savers, and it was on Monday, so it was half price. And I don't even know if half price was a good deal for this pumpkin because I had a lot of things I had to take off. I had also thrifted this silver tray, and it had that weird section in the middle. I don't know why. If you know what this was originally, let me know. But anyway, so I thought this will be the perfect base for my pumpkin. And as you can see, I needed a lot of flowers for this pumpkin. So, and I still wasn't using cornstarch because it was working so well. So I still was just popping them in the freezer. Now the pumpkin is ready for the salt wash, and boy did it need it because of all those pins I had to pull out in the very beginning. There were a lot of pinholes. Now most of them were covered with the flowers, but there were still a lot left. This time I just used some inexpensive craft paint because when the salt wash dries, I'm going to spray paint this pumpkin. And I used Rust-Oleum spray paint 2 times in the color Claret Wine. And here it is after it's all spray painted. You know, sometimes I do love using spray paint, but there are a lot of dips and pinholes that still show after the salt wash, so I'm going to fill those with a little clay. After I got the holes filled, I respray painted, and now I'm adding the dark wax. And I wasn't loving the way the dark wax looked over the spray paint. I did use a little clear wax to try to lift up some of the dark wax, but you never know till you try, so you'll have to let me know. Have you ever used a dark wax over spray paint, and how did it turn out? And this time I'm going to use Wiseau Heavy Metals Metallic Gilding Paint, and I'm using the color Gold Dust. And I'm just using my finger again to apply the paint to the tops of the flowers. I used the same paint to paint the stem on the pumpkin, and then I also went around the sides of the flowers and painted those as well. And this time, after cleaning the silver tray, I sanded it, and then I used a paint primer before I spray painted it in the same Claret Wine. And that method worked because I had no paint that peeled off. This time I used Wiseau glaze in the color Black Walnut, and I loved the way it turned out. And here is my version of Dark and Moody Autumn. You'll have to let me know what you think. And see those dead branches in the vase on the left? That's from my tree that I don't think is going to survive this hot summer. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps my channel so much. And we'll see you next time.